What's up guys, my name is Khan and we're back today with more Scrap Mechanic, and today we're going to build something I should have built a long time ago, and that is a drift gyro. I really want to make a drift car in Scrap Mechanic that doesn't use any thrusters. I've built some sort of pseudo drift cars before, but they had thrusters and sensor systems to try and force the car to slide. And with the new updates in Scrap Mechanic a while ago, we ended up with these low friction blocks. So I built a test rig, and the idea is that we're gonna have a gyro that automatically applies a little bit of counter steer as we drive. And that's sort of how RC drift works. And it works really, really well, and it gives you a really cool control. You still have the ability to steer, but obviously it kind of does a little bit of the counter steering for you based on your horizontal velocity. So you can see this rig actually works really well. This is with just, four wheels on the ground. There's no extra blocks touching the ground or anything. It's just four wheels on suspension. And, we've got like 70 degrees of steering or something like that. So we can actually pull some crazy angles. And you can see it's not bad, but it's kind of grippy, right? In Scrap Mechanic, the friction on the wheels is really high. So what I thought was, if we use a piston like this, and we use a little bit of mod pack logic, we could actually set this piston to be like a length of 1. And there we go. Now if it's a length of 1, they're pressing up against the ground. If we go any higher, like if we go to a length of 2, it lifts the whole car off the ground, obviously, so let's not do that. But if we go to like 1.1, let's say, right, we're still just slightly off the ground. You can see the wheels want to grip, but they can't. We've got that extra 0.1 of a block. But we can go to a really, really cool number, and we can go like this and go 1.01. This is 1.01. And now, technically speaking, the block is below the wheel, but it's not really. The wheel still gets grip. And now it's like really, really, really slidey. So I just built this rig because I thought it was something we could play around with maybe some settings and see if there's a way to do it. I think the best setting, honestly, is probably just 1 even, where you just have a block that helps support the weight of the wheel. And you can see this is attached below the suspension, so the whole suspension still moves. This is just trying to remove some of this friction from these blocks that we have. And this seems to work well at 1. You can see it kind of like gets a little bit of that slide. So what I did here is I set up 2 velocity meters, and I realized I don't actually need to do that. I probably only need 1, but this is basically outputting our velocity, and the velocity is the direction, like the speed in a direction, right? So if we go straight, like this almost stays at 0 if we go perfectly straight. But then when we start to turn, we'll see it goes up. It's kind of hard to tell, but you can see it's up in the big numbers now, right? And the idea is that it's measuring our horizontal velocity, and when we slide the other way, it goes into the negative. So when we're sliding to the left, it's negative, and then when we slide to the right, it's positive. And that's sort of how a drift gyro on an RC car works. We mount them usually right behind the steering servo in the front, so they're pretty close to the front. They're a little bit maybe forward of middle of the car, maybe where our engine is on this car here. And ideally with that setup, as your car starts to slide sideways, it applies a little bit of a counter steer, and then you also have to kind of counter steer with it. But it just sort of helps keep the car stable at specific angles, and then of course we have to tune it. So let's see if we can make one. And the way we're gonna have to do this is kind of weird. So we need this velocity sensor, that's the first thing. And I guess we'll just put that into a number. Should probably put that into like an addition block or something. So we'll put an addition block here. I'm gonna try and build a module that we can eventually just remove from this car and mount to any other car. So there we go. So we go like this, we put a module, we put a velocity sensor this way, which has to be sideways. And then we need to change our steering around. So our steering has to be controlled now by a stepper motor. Essentially what we're doing is we have to have our steering input plus some value of this velocity sensor controls the actual stepper motor output position. And then the stepper motor has to go between positive 75 and negative 75 degrees, or positive and negative, whatever the heck we want. If we look at the stepper motor settings, white is speed, black is power, gray is stiffness. Okay, so we need at least a white and a black version of these. So we'll paint this one white. White is speed, black is power. We'll put both of those into there. And we'll just give them some values. So the speed probably moves at, I don't know what the speed units are. Let's try 100 to start. I know with pistons, they gotta be a really low speed number because I think it's like extension blocks per second or something. So the speed on this white one here is like 5 or something, so they don't move too crazy quick. And then for power, we're just gonna crank that up to like, this is 100,000. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, that's bad. That's bad. I didn't give it a position. Hold on, that's really bad. It needs a position. Let's give it just an orange default 0 position. There we go. So now it won't move. Perfect. All right, yeah, and then, I don't know, like, let's just reset that power. Let's set this to there. Let's go 1,000,000. Boom, done. Just like infinite power, basically, so these bearings will never get stuck. So now, somehow we have to provide this. I think if we output, okay, hold on. We got to output our steering to a WS converter, or AD converter, sorry. And that outputs between -1 and 1, okay. So this becomes our steering input. If we turn left, it's negative. If we turn right, it's positive. And then that plus, like, hold on a minute. That would go, this needs to be multiplied by like 85 or something. It needs to be multiplied by our steering angle. Yes, okay, hold on. Yeah, no, I know. Stop freaking out, we're good. Okay, so this has to be multiplied. Don't worry, this is all gonna make sense in the future, I promise. It's just confused. You gotta kind of think about all the number logic in your head, but the reason I have to use the mod pack is I don't think there's any way to do this without the mod pack. So this one here, that's our steering angle. I can just paint this like literally, I actually don't know if I can paint it, because paint kind of determines the digits. But yeah, that's our steering angle, so it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're gonna have 75 degrees of steering angle, right? Yeah, perfect. And then technically, if I were to multiply this by this, now it's 0, and that's backwards. Okay, so hold on. So this needs to be multiplied by a -1, or this needs to just be -75. So we can fix that. All right, perfect. There we go, -75. So now if I turn left, the wheels go left. If I turn right, the wheels go right. We can crank up the speed on that because that is really slow. Let's go to 200, that's still pretty slow. 3, 4, 5, 500. Yeah, we want that snap steering, especially because we're gonna have the gyro help power this. So we got to make sure that it can do like the snap steering that we want to actually, you know, can keep us controlled throughout a drift. All right, so that's perfect. So that's literally the direct input from that. And then what we need is the gyro to also provide an input to this. Actually, it probably needs to be interrupted on the steering here. We probably need to reduce the steering. So the velocity sensor is going to output a huge number. And then we need to divide it by the gain. So this is the velocity sensor number. It's going to be the white number there. We're going to divide it by some gain value, which we can assign. And this is how like a real gyro works. You assign it a gain to basically say, like at 0 gain, it won't do anything. So if you had a 0 gain gyro, which I think we could get the math on this one to work that way too, but if you have a 0 gain gyro, it should just drive like a normal car with 100% steering. I run my gyros on my drift cars generally at about 60 gain out of 100. So that's how that works. I don't know how that works in terms of the math that it applies though, but basically as I steer, as I like whip sideways into a corner, the car automatically applies a little bit of counter steer, and then you have to basically control how much counter steer you want to move the car left or right along the drift path you're on. It's really hard to explain. It feels super intuitive when you drive it. It's very difficult to master, and there's a lot of throttle control that goes into that as well. But anyway, all right, so I think this will be our gyro gain. So if we adjust this black number there, and let's just put some digits down so we can see it. So it's gonna take our velocity and divide it by this number, whatever the heck this number is. And this number is gonna have to be probably pretty big. So let's go up to like 500. Obviously this is not gonna relate to 100%, but essentially here we're taking whatever our velocity is, and we're dividing it by some number, and that's gonna give us a fraction. And then I think if we add that to our steering input, then that will give a new input that then goes here to give us the angle that we want. So it's incorporating this velocity. And the bigger the number we put here, the less that velocity, like the smaller the velocity output from this becomes, which means, yeah. I think this is gonna work. Like, I think this is the setup. So this needs to come off here. Yeah, I know, you're gonna snap, okay. So we need to add the gyro division factor, which I don't know which direction that's going to be. It might need to be negative. It might need to be multiplied by a -1. So let's put a multiplication here. We're going to multiply it by nothing. And then we're going to add it to the steering input of this. right? And then that goes to there. Okay, so when we hook this up to a new car, the steering goes here, we hook the thing into there, and this is this blue one. If I do that, does that mess something up? No. Okay, so the blue one would be our steering value, how big of an angle we want on our steering, so we could adjust that. These we wouldn't have to change. This black one down here is our gain value of our gyro, and then our steering hooks into this. So this is actually a pretty decent module. We could easily just move this around. The digital display for that doesn't matter, but that's it. So this should technically be our whole drift gyro. Okay, what's gonna happen if I turn though? It's not doing anything. You see, this is normally what happens when you first set up an RC car for the very first time. You finally get all the electronics hooked in, you build the whole chassis, you put the motor in, you wire up all the electronics, you think you've done it right, you turn on the power button, and then you go to drive it, and usually nothing happens. I mean, it's pretty much, well, sometimes some stuff happens. I've had it where cars drive, but usually the gyros don't work. So what's not happening here? This velocity value, right, is outputting, like that is velocity? Yeah, it's like, okay, let's get some display. I need some troubleshooting. Is 500 dividing it too much? Oh, 500 is probably just dividing it too much. Yeah, okay, if I put it to 0, it's like freaking out. That's awesome. Let's go 10. Let's go 50. How much does 50 divide it out? Oh, okay, the gyros, see, it's in the wrong direction. It is in the wrong direction. Okay, so we have to multiply it by -1. So I put that there, perfect. So now we just put a -1 down. Yeah, it is in the wrong direction. It was helping us steer, and also 500 was way too big. So let's go -1 there. So now the gyro's positive. That's also a setting on gyros in real life, a reverse setting. So now if I try and whip it, it counter steers. Okay, it's not bad. It needs a little bit more strength. That's so good though. It's almost there. Like it's actually pretty good. It needs a little bit more strength to counter steer correctly. Like it's not, or honestly, we just need more speed. I don't. Let me try some things first. Let's reduce the pistons to 0. Let's try driving it without any pistons at all. We might need more engine power. I might have to honestly just, instead of doing something with pistons, I might have to honestly just use the engineering mod that gives us the drag reducer block that basically makes our cars have no drag. And that might make this a million times better. Yeah, like, cause the problem with scrap mechanic is you have way too much friction all the time, right? This is pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, it is pretty cool. I can tune a few settings. It definitely needs a little bit less steering input from the person. It needs to be like a little bit of a slower response on that. Kind of like maybe the steering speed needs to be reduced a little bit. That's pretty good though. This I want to bring back down. This is so cool. But yeah, I might have to just use the drag reducer block instead of these piston attachments. Let's set it back to 1, so it's just kind of holding them. Let's go 50 there. And then let's increase the engine power. Let's upgrade that. Let's just bring that up a little bit more. And 50 on that, 75. Yeah, the speed on this. Right, let's bring the speed down. I don't know what the speed's set at right now. Let's reset that to 0. Let's set it to like 100. How's 100? That's a little too slow, right? I think we had it set to like 500 before. Let's try 200. Maybe, let's try 300. 300 is probably a good speed. Yeah. So now if we also need like an actual road to test this on. Yeah, we might honestly just need the drag reducer. The counter steer is pretty strong. It's pretty aggressive. It needs to be kind of tuned out a little bit because you want it to not completely override your drift. You want it to just kind of assist you in counter steering. This one's like really like fighting to get us back to mid, which makes sense. Oh, I can over rotate. That's interesting. Oh, I can go past 1. Oh, I need an absolute. Yeah, I can. Oh, that's a problem. Okay, I need an absolute function on this as well. So we can't push our steering past 1. Okay. Okay. Let's save this. Let's go to another map. Drift test chassis, right? And then let's go to a map that actually like is just generated with some roads. and I'm gonna grab the drag reducer block as well. We're gonna play around with that because I feel like the drag reducer block, like when we drift in real life, we're trying to make as slick a surface as possible to go as smooth as possible for as long as possible. So we run on like polished concrete, on polished hardwood, you know, we run on really smooth, slick surfaces, and Scrap Mechanic just has too much friction. We need to break that. All right, we're here on the canyon map. Let's spawn in the chassis here. And there we go. So we do happen to have this canyon road, which is kind of nice. Let's reduce this back to 0 again with the piston setup. And let's fix this absolute nonsense. So we need to make sure that this, hold on a minute, is this plus this. So this signal coming over to here has to be no greater than 1. And I think there's a math block that lets us do that. Well, no greater than 1 or -1 is essentially where it's at. So let me grab this thing. I think there's a block. I know there's a round block. I don't know if we can put a limit on it. We might need to do like 2 math blocks, one for sealing and one for, this might actually get a little bit complicated. Let's see here though. Let me just grab this. Maybe I can do it with 1 block. What is it that I can do? Round. Round's the input. Yeah, sealing. Max input. Output's the highest input value. More than 1 input, floors input up, then adds together. Right, yeah. See that? Then I'd have to floor the negatives. Oh no, that's not what I want. Absolute, no. Root, bit, no. Sine, no. X, Y. You gotta think about a way to do this easily because I have to make sure that like we're never outputting outside of 1. We always want to output hypotenuse of the 2 inputs. No. 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 Do I output just like, yeah, because it's got to output only like the one. Okay, I'm gonna think of this for a sec. Alrighty, so we're back and I've actually spent a bit of time. I pretty much rebuilt the whole mechanism and I was hoping there'd be a better way to do it than this, but this is pretty much where we're at. And it's not perfect. I'd like to hear your guys' suggestions from the comments for sure, because I think we can make it better, but the basic principle's there. So the issue I was having before, which I had to work out, was that basically what we're doing is we're saying, you know, you're providing a steering input of 1 and -1, which has to provide a steering input to the wheels of 1 and -1 multiplied by the angle the wheel is at. And then of course the second input is provided by this velocity sensor, this lateral velocity sensor, divided by this number here, which in our case is -150. And those two numbers are added together. So we take our velocity sensor divided by 150 and we add that to our player's steering input. Now the problem with that is, of course, if that's greater than 1 or less than -1, then the steering goes further than the set degrees that we've set to. So I was thinking of like a better way to do this, and I was hoping there'd be a better way to do this with like a single function, but unfortunately I couldn't think of anything, so that's what all this extra logic is here at the bottom. And essentially what it does is it checks 2 conditions. So it says, okay, let's add the player steering input to the gyro position, right? The position that the lateral sensor tells us we need to add to. But then if those 2 values are greater than 1, then just output 1. And if those 2 values are less than -1, then just output -1. Otherwise, add the 2 together and output that. And so what you end up with is a device where I can turn to the right and I can turn to the left, no problem. And that, you know, works fine. But then when we actually drive, the gyro will auto steer against us, but we'll never, even if I turn left with the gyro, we're never going back past that, you know, that absolute angle that we have of 85 degrees, where before, you know, it would go back as far as it wanted to. So it works pretty well. You can see we actually have no frictionless blocks on the ground. This is just flat up drifting with, you know, just wheels. It does have one of those drag reducer blocks on the back, which I think just kind of makes the car slide a little bit better. Although to be honest, like we can kind of, you know, we can remove it and it doesn't really make too much of a difference. So we can take the drag reducer off and, you know, we'll have the same sort of effect here. You can just see the drifts just aren't as like, they're not as big, you know, because there's more friction pushing us forward, obviously through each drift. But you can still do nice drifts, no problem. And again, I'm not steering at all right now. This is just it counter steering, and all I'm doing is holding the throttle at full speed, and it just keeps pushing us around, doing donuts, and it auto tries to correct. So it's really, really cool stuff. I think it's better personally with the drag reducer, but there are a few issues I've realized, and you know, I'd like to see what you guys think about it. Number one, you may have noticed I've got this weird steering bar on the top here. We're actually steering with this, and we're not steering directly into the AD converter like we had before. I'm using this as an AD converter, and the reason why is because the sensor now outputs a position, basically, so it goes between, it'll be like 2 blocks and 0 blocks, depending on how far we are, and that sensor is what we're using to feed into our formula, that distance there, -1, obviously, so it stays zeroed. And the reason why I want to do that is with this steering, we can actually adjust the speed, and so we can use it as like a smoothing function. So if I bring this down to 1, then as we turn, you can see it takes a while for the sensor to actually move over, so the wheels take a bit, and this helps us a lot, especially because we're on a keyboard input and we can't map a controller. So you can see if I want to tap A and D, I'm not going from like +100 to -100 right away, you know, I'm not going from 1 to -1. This kind of acts as a bit of a smoothing function, so that's kind of cool. I think we need to do the same thing for the throttle, because one of the biggest things with like RC stuff is that, you know, we're never 100% all the time. Like, I'm not 100% steering, 100% throttle. That's a terrible way to drift. You need to be gradual on your throttle, and you need to be gradual on your steering. You have to be able to steer gradually into corners, and then steer gradually to counter steer, and then same thing with your throttle. Right now, I'm just literally pinning the throttle at full speed, and that works great. But honestly, I need to be able to, you know, give it partial throttles to maintain large sweeper angles and stuff like that. You can see it works out pretty well. We're getting close. We're closer than I thought we would, but I think I need to do something to smooth out the forward and reverse throttle, as well as smooth out the steering throttle a bit more. It's kind of okay, and of course we can play with the angles that our steering is at, but in reality, like, it does drift really, really well, considering we're not using any low friction blocks. It's literally just 4 wheels on the ground, and we're rear wheel drive. So we're drifting with nothing but those rear wheels pushing us forward and then requiring momentum. So it's cool stuff. I think it needs a little bit of work, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know if you have any ideas on how to make it better. It is, like I said, I can take that whole module off and pop it on another car. I do kind of want to work on it a little bit more. I think we need to incorporate a throttle control that maybe isn't a motor. I'm not sure if we can control a motor with logic or not, so we might have to incorporate it into like an all-in-one RC module that includes a motor, and then that way we can slap the whole module onto a drift car, just hook a seat into it, and then hook our steering and our drive out of it, and, you know, it'll be good to go. So that would be the ideal thing, would be to create that kind of a module, but you can see it's pretty good. I mean, it does pull some pretty ridiculous drifts. We are back on flat ground, and that's because the terrain bouncing kind of messes it up a bit, you know, scrap mechanic things, but it's not bad. I mean, it's for sure, like, look at that, like, that's really smooth. We just need to be able to sort of tap our steering a little bit to keep us on that angle, and unfortunately I can't exactly do it without just causing it to, yeah, it's still a little too twitchy on the steering. We need to be able to do like a joystick steering, which is unfortunate that Scrap Mechanic doesn't have controller support, because that would be a lot easier. If we could hook this into a controller where we'd have a trigger that actually has gradual throttle inputs and a steering with gradual inputs, I feel like we can make this a lot better. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below if you have any ideas on how to do gradual inputs and how to make this better. And then of course, once we figure out this whole setup and figure out a good gyro settings, because I think the gyro is the most important thing, once we have that, then we'll have to start looking at chassis and suspension setups, and then actually making a drift car that can run a track, and then of course actually building some drift tracks, because I know there's some drift tracks on the workshop in Scrap Mechanic. I'd love to build my own as well, and I'd love to have a drift car that, you know, actually can transition from one sweeper to the next and not just, you know, do these like crazy high-speed spin outs all the time. We want to be able to do a nice sweeper into another nice sweeper. If I put 2 drag reducers, does that do anything? Oh, I could do 3. I don't know if it does anything different with multiple. I don't know, it doesn't feel any different. I feel like it's all still the same. But yeah, we also need some camber on these wheels too. We need a lot of different things going on. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, like and subscribe, and as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see y'all next time. I will upload this to the workshop once we figure out some stuff.